Hi and welcome back to the channel, and in this episode we're going to keep going with this Liberty Legacy B4 build. Yes, so we have got some more progress done on this car and we'll get into that in a sec. Also, you may have seen that we put out finally a video on our orange forest weapon, the GC8 that we've been building in the background. We've got that up and running as well. If you haven't checked that video out yet, then go and check out our channel and have a look. Right, let's get going with what we've done so far, where we're up to, and what we're going to do very shortly. We're down to getting everything tidied up a bit in terms of wiring and whatnot. The ECU is now mounted in the car, and also the wiring loom's all tidied up and wrapped. We reused the factory wrap that was around it. All these other plugs and wires floating around here are for all sorts of stuff that's not being used with climate control and everything else. So eventually that'll all get tied up and out of the way, but we've still got a couple of wires to identify in there, so we'll leave that for the time being. Unfortunately, we think the bracket that retained the original ECU in place has gone with all of the interior stuff when all that was taken out, and we don't have that. So we've mounted the ECU directly to the floor or the start of the firewall there. It's fixed down well, that's no problem, and Link has its own bracket. And then it's just a matter of trying to work out how to get this, which is the factory ECU cover, in position and fixed in place. It doesn't seem like much of a drama, except that we've only got one bolt right at the top there. There's no other fixings on this thing because they would have all been fixed to that ECU bracket. So we'll have to work out how we're going to do that and fix it down, just to have an additional cover over the top of the ECU. And after a little bit of mucking around and a little bit of lateral thinking, that's the cover bolted on. Right, that is the roof vent and the sunroof sorted out. So basically the deal with this is had to make up a cardboard template to start with and trace that out, which is not the easiest to do, but trace that out from the inside. The roll cage is in the way there, but anyway, got that done. And then once that is done, then basically cut that out, transfer that to the aluminium, and then I needed the sheet to be wider. So basically the opening somewhere in here about 20 mil inside, give or take. So there's a 20 mil lip around the outside. And then once that's all sorted out, I also got the roof vent cut in as well into that and measured and sorted out and set in place. Then it's a matter of getting it down. Now it's got a bead of sealant underneath it. This is actually supplied by the customer, this sheet. So it's 1.6 mil aluminium. So it's quite rigid. It went on the roof okay, no problems there. It's nice and solid there, which is great. Bead of sealant on the inside, and then rivet it down, and that is all done to make sure that no water is going to get in underneath that, and that is another job ticked off the list. So first up this morning was to get the electrical loom in the rear of the car into some convoluted tube and then get all that fixed down. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's much neater, so it just tidies the interior of the car up. But the other reason is because it helps to protect the electrical system from damage. See, even though the electrical wires, the wires themselves still may have insulation on them, if they're rubbing, so they get mechanical damage, particularly against bare metal, there's a possibility that the insulation could get rubbed through, and that could cause an electrical drama, a fault, or potentially even a fire. So we don't want that. So therefore, putting it in the tube makes it much safer. Also, using this kind of tube rather than using, say, insulation tape or some other form of insulation or protection, is that if we need to get at the wiring for some reason, like in a rally or whatever, it's quite easy to be able to get the wires out of the convoluted tube without causing any damage. So if we need to repair something or look into something, then we can do that. Now, the other thing that is also critical now is the positioning of the wiring loom, and it was something we've always done this anyway. However, it's now been cast into the rules. So as you may notice here, looking at the cage, we have got the electrical loom underneath the cage, or on the inside. they've now passed it into rule that all electrical wiring, fuel and brake lines must be inside the roll cage rather than on the outside. Now, quite often in a factory car, and you can see we've covered these holes here, these are positions where the electrical loom would have been originally clipped into, because it's quite common for them to run down the inside sills of the car, and that's fine in a road situation. However, in a rally, just imagine if we had, say, the wiring running down this side between the cage and effectively the door, the rear door here. Now, if the rear door cops a knock for some reason, or there's some damage to the car and you've got wiring, fuel or brake lines in this area here, it's very easy for them to get squashed or damaged in here. Now, that could become a real safety problem. Imagine if it's like a fuel line and it gets damaged and split, and then fuel's leaking into the car, and then you've got electrical in there as well, and the electrical loom's damaged, and then, you know, causes a fire. So therefore, we've always done it this way. The rules now are that all of this wiring has to be run inside the cage. So what we've done is, to make it neat, just cable tied it underneath the cage, same sort of thing. And then that way, if something does come in here and cop a knock for some reason anywhere along the sides of the car, it's not going to damage the electrical system. And of course, we've already run the brake and fuel lines up probably the safest point of the car, really being right in the center, up the tunnel to where it needs to go. While we're at it, also we have reused the cables for the fuel release and the boot release. Why did we do that? Well, just simply the way that these Liberties are set up, it's not that easy to be able to mount some other latching system to the boot. They also use an electrical release like a button, so instead of that, this one's got cable as well, so we use the cable release, and that will be perfectly fine to be able to get the boot open and the fuel door open in this car. Ask any fabricator or race shop what their least favourite task to do is, and probably somewhere near the top of that list would be fitting seat rails and race seats. It is, as I've said on many occasions in the past, a very long and tedious process. We've just about got the driver's seat sorted out now in this Liberty, and then onto the co-driver seat, which is actually a little bit easier. There is still some work to go though. Right, still carrying on with the wiring, although it is getting towards the pointy end. I won't dwell on this too long. I know you probably had enough of it now. So it has all been tidied up, believe it or not, and a lot of all the redundant plugs and bits and pieces have all been tied back, and things are sort of in their, roughly in their permanent positions now. There's still a few bits to go. You might have noticed that there's some tape on a few bits and pieces here. There is a bit of a story behind that. So we had the factory dash plugged in. That's what these green plugs are for. However, nothing on the display was working at all, and that was kind of a bit odd, and originally thought some of that had to go into the body control module, so plug the body control module back in, because that was we still have that piece of gear. However, that made no difference. Still weren't getting anything on the display, which is unusual because the CAN bus had all been set up, and there's a few other bits and pieces. As it turns out, this particular Subaru dash and its set up with the ECU is a bit of a hybrid sort of thing, and it's quite complicated, and there's a fair bit of proprietary stuff in the CAN bus. So Link were sort of saying that they might be able to get the dash to run, to get like the tacho working and things like that. However, he still wouldn't be able to get rid of all the warning lights that would be up all over the dash, and we definitely wouldn't have a speedo, because the speedo is driven through the ABS unit and the ABS wheel sensors, and they are obviously all removed out of the car. So basically what happened was that the customer, after a discussion, has opted to go with a Link AIM Strata dash. So we've ordered that, we're waiting for that to come in. It does solve the problem because we'll be able to display all the data we need to. However, we did need to go through the wiring and find then some of the indicators, low beam, high beam, trigger, things like that, that go into the factory plug. So we had to test those out because they're going to be rewired into the Link dash. Also, we needed the CAN bus wiring or CAN bus signal from the ECU, so that we could obviously provide all the data into the ECU. The link dash will have its own GPS unit in it that will provide speed. Now, something else that was very interesting, that we took quite some time to work out what was going on here. We weren't getting any charge, so the alternator wasn't charging the battery at all, and we knew that this particular alternator did have a control from the ECU, so we were looking into that. However, in this car, it's kind of a funny setup. Basically what happens is that the ECU didn't really control the charging as such. It disengaged the charging. So when the battery was full or the loads were light on the electrical system, the ECU would effectively cut the alternator out or cut the charging back. So connecting up the charge wire to the ECU wouldn't have fixed the problem. And it took considerable time because we thought it was coming up to the dash and a few other places, and in the end we found this plug in the wiring loom, which has nothing to plug into it. Presumably that's gone. And in there, I don't know if you can see that, it says ALT. So this was the signal wire that goes to the ECU to tell the to the alternator, to tell the alternator to start charging. So once we provided power there through a light, through a globe, we got the alternator charged. So that was a good one. Similarly, the oil light wouldn't work, and the fuel and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces wouldn't work either and weren't displaying on the dash. And we took, again, a lot of head scratching, followed it through to this plug. So whatever was plugged into this was a little box of electronics, controlled a fair bit of critical stuff around the car and provided info to the dash, etc, etc. We don't have that anymore, so we are doing away with it, and there is some rewiring to do there to get that up to the dash and get that working. Won't be difficult, but it's we've identified it anyway, and then it's just a matter of running the wires up. So once the link dash arrives, we can get the rest of it sorted out. One that is a common issue with all of the Subarus and a lot of the later model cars is to do with the horn. It is a requirement to have one for rally as you're driving it on the public roads, so it needs to work. Now this one is quite straightforward to sort out, because what happens is usually in the steering wheel, obviously you have the horn button in the factory steering wheel in there. However, behind that there is, especially vehicles with airbags, there's a gadget called a clock spring that sits in there, and it's kind of basically a bunch of contacts that touch the back of the factory steering wheel. Obviously once you remove the airbag, the factory wheel and that clock spring, you no longer have that horn button there. However, there is wiring there for the horn, so when we get to that part, putting the dash back in, this will have be cut and then have a button wired on there to push, so that we've got the horn operating. So that's a nice easy one. Amongst the other little electrical things that we've got to sort out, haven't got the ignition switched on at the moment, is the reverse lights. Now initially when we first put the wiring loom together, the reverse lights didn't work. It didn't matter whether you put the car in reverse or otherwise. And then once we got everything sort of connected up and back in its correct places, the reverse lights were then stuck on, and they couldn't be switched off. So that took a bit of mucking around to work out what was going on there, and it is actually some issue underneath the car on the transmission that we're going to have to work out. I have a suspicion that the maybe the reverse light switch and the neutral switch have been swapped over or something like that on the gearbox. The wrong one's been put back in the wrong place, and so instead of being off or open contact, it is closed contact all the time, and that's causing the lights to be on. But again, that took a little bit of time to chase that out and go through that. Under the bonnet, and in the previous video, we talked about the inlet air temp sensor, the IAT, that we've put in. However, while we're at it, since then we have also wired in this gadget. It is an oil pressure sensor. So on the H6 engine, or the EZ30 engine, underneath by the oil filter is where the oil light sensor goes. That's basically just a switch, it's sort of on or off, which provides a warning to the dash. And as I said earlier, the dash warning light wasn't working, so we had intended to do this anyway, was to put in an oil pressure sensor. these sensors do not cope well with being mounted directly to the engine. You get a lot of vibration and a lot of heat. Particularly there's probably very little space to be able to get this in. So effectively what it's got is a remote mounting kit, which means there's a braided line down to the oil filter underneath the engine, or the oil filter housing, and then the line comes up to here and the oil pressure sensor is mounted here. We have used, there were some extra wires from the airflow meter that weren't being used for the inlet air temp sensor, so we have used those to drive this and wired that into the ECU. So now we are getting correct oil pressure readings, which also helps us as well. It is something that we're doing a lot more commonly these days with these rally cars, if they're fuel injected or they're running on ECU, is to put an oil pressure sensor in there, because it gives a more accurate picture of what the oil pressure is doing. Also in the software we can put some protection tables in there, so some configurations in the system that if the oil pressure drops below a certain level, it'll automatically cut the engine out or start retarding the engine if the oil pressure keeps dropping. So if there is some drama with the engine and the oil pressure is giving trouble for some reason, it'll cut the engine, because one of the problems with the factory warning light is by the time the oil light comes on, it's generally too late. And in this particular case, because we are using the Link dash, we can also, there is an oil light on the display on that dash as well, and so when the ECU is seeing low oil pressure, it'll start protecting the engine, but it will also turn that oil light on and inform the driver that there is a problem as well. Another little task, which is quite time consuming, is to make up door trims for the car. The factory door trims have gone, so we don't have those to be able to use. So we are using aluminium sheet. Customer supplied us with this, so it's 1.6mm aluminium, so it's quite sturdy stuff, the same stuff that we used for the roof vent. Now we could have used these, which are the factory door handles. However, they were designed to fit into the factory trims by the look of it, and we're just not able to get these to seat anywhere, and we couldn't sort of cut a hole and bolt them down to the door frame itself. Just really didn't have any option there with it. We did look and look and look. So anyway, basically what we've done is, this is the door release cable here. We'll have to make up a pull handle to go on there and bring that through. Locking mechanism will be sorted separately. Also, there's a bit of a clearance issue there, because the plug for the power window motor sits in quite tightly there, and we just couldn't get this trim to clear. So we're not sure what we'll do there yet. We might put some sort of cap over that once we've got the wiring done, and we're going to have to tee up how we fit a power window switch in there as well. This is the back of the dash. Not very exciting, you may think. So basically what happened was, the factory heater box would have been attached in this position here. Obviously that's all gone out of the car now. So what we've done is 3D printed up this collector to fit over the factory opening, so that we can use this flex on it and connect it up to a different style of blower to get air up to the dash for demisting. Now all of this around the outside is just sealant. We've glued this on and then screwed it down to the factory points. 3D printing certainly does make life easier. A little while this morning spent getting this aluminium panel fabricated up and sorted out, and a switch panel mounted in there. So these two switches will be for the blower fan, for demisting the windscreen, and also for spotlights on and off. This here is just a voltage display, but it's also got USB points in it as well, so can charge things like phones or tablets or whatever else might be needed in the car. And we have mounted the switches down lower because we don't know later on what we may need to mount up here. Maybe a display or something for some reason, or potentially we could even mount the rally safe unit directly there if needs be. Plumbed in fire extinguisher systems or firebomb systems. So let's go through this. We've started the install already of this. We'll take you through it with us. The regulations say you've got to have 2 points of actuation of the fire extinguisher system. One internal inside the car, so we have mounted the handle there, and the other one outside the car, external. So we have mounted it here. The windscreen will be here, and this will be, it's on the top of the scuttle panel there. And this one is what they call a mechanical system, so it's actually got a physical cable that goes around, and we'll show you the tank shortly, goes to the tank. However, you can also get electric systems, and they do pretty much the same sort of thing. Same rules apply for electrics. Inside, earlier on I said we had some other stuff potentially to mount on this panel, and there it is. Easily accessible by the driver and the co-driver from a central position there. And basically the two cables, they're kind of like bicycle brake cables or bicycle gear cables. This is the outer sheets of those cables. We've run them around. Obviously they've all got to be tied back when we've got everything sorted. And it's now just a matter of working out where we're going to put the tank. The tank is now securely mounted in properly. I've already started on laying out the tubing for the plumbed-in extinguisher system. So this is basically how it's going to connect up around. It's already sort of down the tunnel and started cable tying that in. So we'll get it hooked up here. We'll cut the tubes. We've got to make sure they're cut square and neatly and all the rest of it. So we'll get on and do that. And then we'll start fitting up all the nozzles. This is a continuation of that line there, going all the way along, following the brake and fuel lines. There is the co-driver's side nozzle. It hasn't been screwed on yet. That's the T. They use like a push fitting on them. It goes around, curves around the over the tunnel there to the driver's side, and then at the back there it curves back again and around onto the firewall, and it ends up going through a port right there. Now that blue and pink wire there, that is the trigger for the spotlights that goes to a switch on the dash. We've got to seal up all of those holes in the firewall, same as we have around the cage, to make them comply with the regs. Now for those wondering, those cables there, or that cable there sitting in the background, that is the pull handle that goes to the external pull just in front of the windscreen for the fire extinguisher system. What we have also done is to make sure that these don't rattle. As you can see there, we have put a P-clip in there. We've got a couple of those there. There's one over here as well, just to make sure that these pipes do not rattle. Funnily enough, they're not supplied with this plumbed-in system either, so luckily we have some of those to be able to fix it in place. And through the magic of television, that's what it looks like, all plumbed in and secured into place. So the last thing to do is to fit the actual fire extinguisher nozzles and tighten those up. Hopefully the mic is going to work over the sound of the engine this morning. So already we're stuck into it, getting some work done. Got the ECU plugged into the laptop at the moment. And the reason for that is that we are starting to get the dash sorted out in this car. In a previous episode, we were talking about the factory dash and how we couldn't use that, and so we had to go with another option. And the customer opted for a Link dash, so it matches the ECU, same brand. They're actually not made by Link, they're made by AIM, and they're kind of rebranded Link. But surprisingly, they're actually cheaper to buy them in Australia as Link dashes than they are to buy them as an AIM dash out of Europe. This is interesting. We'll go into the ins and outs of this dash a little bit later on. Basically, to get it running, you need a power and a earth wire, and you need 2 wires to connect up to CAN bus. So we've connected those up when we did all the ECU wiring, and this bit of wire here, we're going to chop that off because it's not needed. That was CAN bus going elsewhere in the car. And as you just saw, when we have the engine running, we've configured the ECU. It's sending data to the dash, and the dash is picking that up and displaying that. There's a whole bunch of screens and a lot of configuration to do. The next thing that we need to do is we need to get the analog inputs in. See, like here I've enabled a left-hand indicator, and this one in here is it's just power wires and things like that. We've gone through and pinned them out to work out where they're coming from. They're going to be fed in through this port here. There's analog inputs into this dash as well. And on the flip side of the dash, hopefully the camera will pick that up, this is actually a road version dash, so it actually has displays on there, like if you can see there, the indicator and headlights and things like that. So we will have to do some wiring and configure those so that they come on from the inputs from the wiring. So a little bit longer to get some wiring done, and then we should be able to plug all that in and get this stuff going. Door trims, and another little while spent. However, it is now pretty much all sorted out. So we had to innovate a little bit with these door trims to get them in because we weren't able to use the factory handles with these aluminium door trims that we've made up. We needed a way to make a release to be able to open the door. So basically a door pull of sorts, or a door release handle. So we've come up with this idea here. So we've 3D printed up a nice little retaining bracket there, and then a D handle there to be able to open the door to release. Same with the window switches. We didn't have the factory switches, and they wouldn't have fit again with the with these aluminium trims. So we have 3D printed up these nice little holders or brackets to hold them in place. These come on. It's illuminated because we've got the ignition on at the moment. So basically that's window down and window up. Doesn't quite work the same way as a factory. They've got separate controls on each side rather than having 4 on the driver's side and then 1 on each door. So these are individually driven, but no dramas there. They work perfectly well. And then here, this kind of looks a bit like a space capsule from the moon landings. This is under here. There is a plug where the factory window motor wiring goes, and that plug sticks out proud of the aluminium sheet, and there really wasn't too many ways to get around that. So instead we've 3D printed a nice little cover there just to protect that plug and the wiring behind there, which of course ends up here. All right, that's another task sorted out. So we are making some headway with this car, which is good news because the time is getting tight. Quick updates on a few bits and pieces we've done in the interior. We have got the door pulls in now to close the doors. Obviously the door trims are all sorted out. We've got the harnesses in, 6-point harnesses all sorted out, including the crotch strap mountings underneath. It might seem like it's quite a simple task to fit harnesses, but it's not really. It's actually quite time consuming, especially adjusting the crotch straps up and getting those right. They're in and done. We've still got to mount a co-driver's footrest. We've got one sitting in here at the moment to position it up, and we've got to mount that down. Even though we've got the plumbed in fire extinguisher system finished, we've still got to fit 2 handheld fire extinguishers. That's part of the requirements as well. So we've got to work out where we're going to fit those. Normally we'd bolt them straight to the floor, flat floor. Unfortunately the Liberty doesn't have a flat floor, and so that's going to require a little bit of lateral thinking how we go about mounting those up, but we'll sort that out and get those in. What else? The Link AIM MXG Strata dash has been all configured and it's all wired up. It works great, which is good news. We're just waiting on the actual dash crash pad to come back along with the mounting, the 3D printing mounting bracket, so that we can mount the Link dash up. There is a bit to that, so we'll show you when we get that all together. How that all goes in, and then once we've got the crash pad in and bolted down or fixed down, we can then get the windscreen in, which is a very important task, obviously. Interior wise, we've still got a few other bits and pieces to do. We've started on the roll cage padding, still got a little bit to do on that. Now this particular padding here, this is kind of the it's just a soft foam padding. A lot of people use like a what they call a pool noodle, if you know what they are, as padding, and that's fine for all of these sort of lower bars and anywhere where you could, you know, bang limbs, arms or legs or whatever against it. However, as a requirement, this kind of padding needs to be used. There's a couple of different types. There's FIA or SFI padding is permitted to be used. This stuff actually has to go at the top, somewhere on the top of the cage, and it's to prevent the helmet from impacting anywhere with the roll cage. So if there's a place where a helmet could potentially impact the roll cage, then we need to use this type of padding. It's actually quite a hard, tough padding, and it is also fire retardant. We won't use this in complete lengths. We'll probably just cut pieces that we need to, where we think that's going to be an issue for the cages, for the helmets to impact on the cage, and that will be that sorted out. In the last couple of days, a fair bit has happened, and we haven't had time to film it. We've just been frantically working on this car to get it ready to go. So probably the most striking and probably the most noticeable is the checker plate on the floor. The customer supplied that for us. It's like a kick plate or a grip plate there that we have fitted in there and fixed down. Also, we have got the handheld fire extinguishers in as well to meet the requirements on both sides. The co-driver's footrest is fixed in as well. The camera might pick that up. You might see there's a yellow wire under there with a glowing green light in it. That is to do with the rally safe wiring. The green light is just telling us that the power is connected to that. So we've pre-wired that and set it there because we're not sure where the customer is going to want the rally safe unit itself. Probably on a roll cage mount, which we don't have for it, just on that bar right in front of the dash there. So that'll work out fine. Also, the dash is actually permanently back in the car now, which is great. Probably not that easy to see. We have got around the back of the dash a 3D printed mounting plate. These Link aim dashes are actually quite heavy, and they need a fairly heavy duty sort of mounting or metal mounting on there. This particular dash, it's funny, they're not fixed in by a great deal. They only have a few sort of screws and fixings, so we've actually had to bolt that to make that work, but it's all in and secured. Obviously we've got all our other bits and pieces in to do with the fire extinguisher and whatnot, and the port just over here on this side is for the data for the dash itself, so you can program the dash and also download like race data and things like that out of it for stage times and things like that if you want to. That is so that is the interior of the car more or less sorted. Still things to go in like first aid kits, safety triangles, and a few little bits and pieces. The best way to fix those in is using Velcro straps. The customer is going to sort that out, and also there may be a little bit of extra roll cage padding needed. Again, those bits are sitting there, so we'll be able to fit those up if the customer needs to put it in. Same with fitting up the intercom. It's really just a few cable ties. Also have got a flash steering wheel in there, customer supplied, with a Boss. Originally we thought we might need a quick release on it, and we do have a quick release unit for it. However, what that did was that spaced the wheel out probably about that far, and brought the wheel too close to the driver. So in this particular case, unless we change the steering wheel or something in the position or whatever changes, it's not necessary. You can still get in and out of the car easy enough without it. So that is that sorted out. And in case you're wondering, this hole here, we will be making up an infill panel for that at some point in the future. However, that shouldn't affect it for scrutineering. Exterior wise, there's not a great deal to see. We have got the mud flaps on and they're all sorted out. And if we can get under there, you can just see underneath the car there is some nice shiny plastic. That is our HDPE underbody protection. It's designed as a deflector so that basically any gravel and rocks and whatever that hits the car or the underneath actually is deflected downwards rather than hitting the rear suspension or potentially the fuel tank, which is what this stuff is really protecting. Under the front of the car, we have got the sump guard mounted up under there and all good to go, with the tow straps which are needed for the regulations. Right, so that's pretty much this Liberty Legacy B4 build more or less done. Still a few little bits and pieces that we do need to tinker with on it in future. Things like it hasn't got spotlights yet on it. The wiring's there, but we need to fit those when the customer decides what they're going to do with that. Also, at the moment, the fuel level gauge, we haven't got that sorted out yet.
It wasn't quite as straightforward as we'd hoped with the dash, so there's a little bit of tinkering to get that sorted out, nothing major. Also a few little bits and pieces inside the car, but again, nothing serious to get that all ready to go. So we're pretty sure that it's pretty good to go for scrutineering, and it should be good to go in its first event, which is just over a week away. I'm sure, as you are, we're also keen to follow the progress of the car to see how it goes, and we will keep you updated in future videos when we cover rallies on how this car runs. Hope you've enjoyed the build of the Liberty B4. Has been an interesting project, and hopefully it's made good viewing. Thanks very much for watching. Please give us a thumbs up. It's important for the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe, and we'll catch you again soon. Cheers.